We are in a state of climate crisis. More and more islands have sunk, and 3-degree temperature rises is right in front of our eyes. Yet what do we do as individuals and organizations? We live life as if everything is normal. We prioritize our happiness and our insatiable needs to consume. We don't even attempt to recycle, even though it is within our capacity to recycle. 3 important points for clarification and framing then. Firstly, what does it mean to recycle in proposition? For individuals, it will look like this. Firstly, they will use goods that are recyclable, for example, recyclable plastics, or using tote bags instead of plastic bags when they go shopping, or reusing waste materials or sending them to recycling bins. For organizations then, or companies, it looks like making products that are recyclable that wouldn't harm the environment in any way. Secondly then, why are all the methods of trying to make regulations ineffective? In the status quo, companies and individuals are undeniable of the environment and degradation and climate change that we face today. Individuals keep consuming without recycling, and companies actively lobby the government to reduce their responsibility. So we think that the only effective way the environment will improve is if individuals and corporations will work together to mitigate the harms that cause the destruction of our environment. The next step to making our own environment better is for every one of us to work together hand in hand. It is not the individuals who will only strive. It is not only the companies or corporations either. Thirdly then, lastly on our model, what does it mean to criminalize? Firstly, there will be a body from the government which consistently monitors the waste, and secondly, heavy fines proportional to how many times the crime has been done and the severity of the action. For example, how much has not been recycled. Lastly, where it has been repeated multiple times, we would implement other punishments, for example, community service or even cleaning waste on their own. Having known what was set up then, let me move on to my arguments. I have 2 important arguments in my speech. Firstly, why does this principally constitute a crime? And secondly, why would this catalyze recycling? On to my first argument then. The premise of this argument is simple. Individuals who refuse to recycle cause such a great harm to society and the individuals around them to the point that it should be counted as a crime. We are saying that recycling should be a key factor applied to our daily lives because this will be a way to start making changes in our environment that is slowly going into destruction. So this is incredibly important because 1, it saves resources, 2, it prevents pollution, thirdly, it supports our public health. Moving on to my first layer of analysis then, what sort of actions will we actually criminalize? 3 metrics for something that could be considered a crime. Firstly, that crime hurts other people's lives actively, just like any other crime. We penalize and criminalize individuals if they hurt people. For example, this just looks like drunk driving or murder, etc. Secondly, it disrupts and harms and hurts the environment around you. This looks like laws against destroying public facilities. And lastly, that people are actively conscious that what they are doing is wrong. Second layer of analysis then, let's take a look at how this actually hurts people. Why then? Firstly, when corporations refuse to recycle, they emit more waste into the environment. The reasons are because resources like oil, timber, and metals are used by these companies to manufacture goods. Whether intended or unintended, it can cause spillover effects on almost everyone in the form of pollution. These are big companies like oil companies and mining companies. For example, Exxon or BP Oil, they produce more carbon dioxide into the air. This is because they prioritize profits over caring for the people. So this impacts individuals in 3 ways. Firstly, it causes more climate change and harms individuals' health across the world. This looks like people who are struggling to live in India or in Southern America because the air quality is simply just too bad. People choke on the air and are intoxicated by the pollutants. So with no form of recycling happening, climate change will arise. This is because we won't use much less energy, which will not turn into fewer fossil fuels burned. There won't be any sort of reduced greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change. Secondly, the unrecycled waste actively pollutes individuals' food and water resources. This looks like Nestle or Aqua plastic bottles all over the river in places like Bali or in less developed areas of Jakarta. And poor individuals actively consume these kinds of things, deteriorating their own health, which issues with digestion, getting illnesses and diseases, or autoimmune issues because of this. This does not only harm just the poor people, but people who consume things in general are hurt. For example, like microplastics. Thirdly, then, it causes pollution that harms the healthy environment. This is because, for example, when companies throw in a bunch of waste that are toxic to the environment, for example, like styrofoam, it will end up in a landfill where the harmful toxins it consists of will merge into the soil, causing cancerous cells to form inside it. Or just by refusing to recycle plastic water bottles, it can literally pollute large bodies of water, like lakes, oceans, or rivers. So in conclusion then, if we do not implement this policy where people or corporations would be criminalized if they do not recycle, there won't be any progress to our already destructive environment. Because at the current pace of the environment slowly dying, we need to do a collaborative action. Otherwise, there would be no hope for the sake of our own environment. Moving on to my second argument then, why would this catalyze effective recycling behavior, which is crucial? First layer of analysis. There is a huge problem that shareholders of companies don't actually care about the environment because they want to maximize their own profits. In the past, shareholders would not change their strategy because in the status quo, there are insufficient mechanisms to check against them. Firstly, public backlash doesn't actually work against these companies because they listen to their shareholders and have a legal relationship with them, rather than listening to the outrage of like the people and activists that are like greater, like Greta Thunberg. Secondly, because regulations can be overridden. For example, like companies can lobby against them to get what they actually want for themselves, for their own advantages. And second layer of analysis then, how will this benefit both individuals and corporations? Why is this an exclusive benefit on our side? Firstly, since companies care so much about maximizing their own profits, recycling can actually help them to maximize both their benefits and the environments. Because the thing is, recycling waste is actually truly so much cheaper than what these companies are actually normally doing, rather than like regular waste collections and disposals. Companies now have an incentive to avoid getting penalized and getting huge tariffs, which cut into their own profit. And secondly, unlike regulations which are controlled by lawmakers, this forms of criminal law cannot be avoided. Because, for example, if there is clear criminal proof, this will go to a judge immediately, and there will be an order for these companies to go to court. We concede that they might still have better lawyers to reduce their sentences. It's not perfect, but at least the very least, they are still guaranteed to get a punishment because it's now considered a crime instead of a breach. Lastly then, for individuals, this also puts a criminal record on them. For example, individuals around them now categorize themselves as a criminal. So if they have done this multiple times, then they will pay for their own doings and receive the punishments. Therefore, in conclusion then, it is critical to recycle to minimize the amount of waste that each and every one of us are actually putting into the atmosphere. Because once we regulate this implementation, people will start to see and be more aware about how important it is to protect our environment. You must propose.